Today's daf is daf pei vav. We're going to begin on the bottom of daf pei hey mid beis, the Gemara, which is approximately 15 lines up before the end of the Amud. And the Gemara asks the following. It says in the Mishnah, Chatas v'yasham vadai, mechaprim, and there are 5 subcategories of a carbon asham, all of which are called an asham vadai. Asham vadai in, asham talui lo. Is the Mishnah implying that only an asham vada is mechaper and an asham toli is not mechaper? In the parasha of asham toli in Vayikra Hey, the pasuk says v'chiper olav hakohen al shigugos asher shagag v'hu lo yada v'nisachlo. Clearly, the Torah is saying that there is a kapara that is brought about through the carbon asham tolu. And if that be the case, why did our Mishnah choose to omit mention of asham tolu? More answers, hanach mechapri kapar gmula. Hanach means these that are mentioned in our Mishnah, whether it's a chatos or an asham vadai, they generate a complete kapara, total kapara. Asham tolu, on the other hand, enu mechapri kapar gmura. It only protects you and prevents you from Yisurim. But at the end of the day, if he finds out that indeed he ate Shuman, he ate Chelav, not Shuman, or he had a relationship with an Erefa, then he will have to bring a Chatas Vada because he has not achieved Kapara through his Asham Tolu. And if the Asham Tolu would have been a complete Kapara, then even when he found out later, he's already brought a carbon for that Avera. Again, he wasn't sure that he actually had violated the Avera. Inami, the Gemara offers a second answer as to why our Mishnah omitted mention of Asham Toli as a mechaper. Hanaf ein acher mechaper kaperosan, but Asham Toli acher hamechaper kaperosan. What does that mean? None. We have a Mishnah in Krisus. Chayve chatos v'ashomos v'adoim she'over aleim Yoma Kippurim chayovim, but ashamos tluyim turim. Now, if you were chayav a chatos or an asham vada, and then before you got a chance to bring the carbon, Yom Kippur passed, nevertheless, you still chayav to bring your carbon. The fact that Yom Kippur is mechaper does not replace that kapar because you're obligated to bring this kapara. You didn't do so. You're still obligated even after Yom Kippurim. But in the case of Asham Tolu, if Yom Kippurim passed before he got a chance to bring his carbon, then he doesn't have to bring an Asham after Yom Kippur. Unless, again, he finds out that for sure he ate chelev or he had a beer with an erev. Then he has to bring a chatas. In any event, you see that there's a substitute kapara for the Asham Tolu, that Yom Kippurim can replace the Asham Tolu and generate kapara, even in the absence of the carbon. The Mishnah says, Misav Yom Kippurim mechaprim im hatshuva. Gemara says, let's be medayik from the Mishnah. Im hatshuva in, bifnei atzmon lo, which means to say that you must have, in addition to tshuva, it says, im hatshuva, if you have tshuva together with the mechaper, then it's mechaper. Yom Kippur, for example, would require, according to our Mishnah, in order to achieve kapar, the accompaniment of tshuva. In the absence of tshuva, Yom Kippur cannot be mechaper. That's the implication of our Mishnah, because Yom Kippurim is mechaper imat tshuva, but dafka imat tshuva. Nema, shall we say that our Mishnah is against Rebbe? The Sanya we learned in Rebbe in a brayso, mi al kol averes misha avra al kol averes shebetorah bein asa tshuva bein lo asa tshuva Yom Kippur mechaper olav, with a very few exceptional cases of very, very, very severe averes. Yom Kippur, according to Rebbe, is mechaper whether he did tshuva or he didn't do tshuva. Al kol averes shebetorah bein asa tshuva bein lo asa tshuva. That's against our Mishnah. Rebbe admits that there are a few cases, as we said before, very severe averos that even tshuva and even Yom Kippur are not mechaper. And what are those? Chutz mi, number one, will accept its girsa of the porik ol, and porik ol is someone who denies he denies the existence of God. He's a kofar b'Kadosh Baruch Hu. And this we'll see in Rashi. Second category is Megala Panu by Torah, which means he's meiz panav. He has ha'ozas panav, a chutzpah, against the Torah. And to quote one example of this, Menashe ben Yehuda made a facetious comment to Moshe Rabbeinu. And he said to Moshe Rabbeinu a lot of things that, according to my opinion, says Menashe Melech Yehuda, the Torah could have omitted them. There was no need for the Torah to write them. So if the Torah is writing certain details about the genealogy of Esau, I don't know what, then that's called Megala Panu B'Torah. And the Gemara says in Masechet Megillah that Misha B'Farsh Zakosu U'Mizarachol Lo Titein Lahavir LaMolech, that it means that you're not allowed to marry a nochris and have a daughter who will worship Avodah Zarah, or a son who will worship Avodah Zarah. Meshaskin also b'nezifa. He's being Megala Panu B'Torah. We have to shut him up, because the accepted understanding of that pasuk is that if a person has a relationship with a nochri or a nochris, then he's chayiv kares. In any event, we have the third category of meifir bris basar. That means he's meifir the mitzvah bris bila. He doesn't circumcise himself. And in these cases, im asa tshuva v'yom kippurim. Here, not like I said before, I stay corrected. Rebbe holds that Yom Kippur per se is not mechaber, but with tshuva he can achieve kaparim. Lo asa tshuva, but Yom Kippur alone could not generate kapara without the accompaniment of tshuva. Gemara now tries to reconcile our Mishnah with Rebbe. Afilu tema Rebbe. What the Mishnah means to say when it uses the terminology Misa v'Yom Kippur mechaprim ima tshuva, what it means to say is that tshuva boy Yom Kippur. Then unless you have together with tshuva Yom Kippur, you cannot achieve a kapara with tshuva alone. However, Yom Kippur lo boy tshuva, doesn't need tshuva. So if, let's say, a person does tshuva, but he doesn't make it till Yom Kippurim, then he will not achieve a full kapara. He needs Yom Kippurim. Tshuva alone does not stand on its own 2 feet without Yom Kippurim. But Yom Kippurim, on the other hand, could be mechaper in and of itself, even without tshuva, and that reconciles us with the shita of Rebbe. Now, when the Mishnah says Misa v'Yom Kippur mechaper ima tshuva, it doesn't mean that Yom Kippur needs tshuva, and the second is ikar, meaning tshuva is ikar, but rather the opposite. The sheni, which here in this case in sequence is tshuva, that's the tofel, that's secondary. And that requires Yom Kippur. The Mishnah teaches us that tshuva mechaperes al averos kalos, al aseh v'al losas. So we have 3 categories here. Now, we could put a comma after the word kalos and interpret the Mishnah that bittul mitzvahs aseh is kalos. So then we only have 2 categories of kaparas tshuva, that's essay and losas. So the Gemara asks the following question: a losas is always more chomer than an essay. Hashta. Now that you've told me that I'll losas tshuva is mechaperes, is al essay the boy? Why did you bother have to spell it out? That tshuva is mechaper on essay. Do I need to know that if it's tshuva is mechaper on losas? How much more so on an essay? Rav Yehuda hachikam. So this is the Amora of Yehuda. Later we're going to have the Tana of Yehuda. We should not confuse them. So Rabbi Yehuda says that when it says the Mishnah, al esev al losas, it doesn't mean every single losas. No. You're not granted kapara through tshuva for every single losase, but rather al essay val losase shenitak liese. This is a lower echelon, less severe losase. It's a losase shenitak liese, for which you don't get malchus. And the reason for that is the Torah was menatek the lav and said, be Makayim the essay and fix up the lav. You don't need tshuva. I'm sorry, tshuva in such a case where the Torah tells you to fix up the lav, and therefore there's no malchus, you don't need anything more than tshuva. But your classic losase, for example, losase gomor, which generates malchus because it's not nitak liese, lo, tshuva alone is not enough to be mechaper. And the Gemara is going to now bring a brisa to contradict this, and we're going to come to the conclusion that there are two shitas on this issue about the status of a lotase, meaning a lav sheishbo malchus, with regard to tshuva, is tshuva mechaper. And the brisa Tosefta says elu hein kalos. What is considered an avera kala which is subject to the kapar of tshuva? Ase velos ase. And here we turn to the daf for today, and that is Peivav Amud Aleph. Chutz mi lo tisa. The Torah says in the Aseres Hadibros in Parshas Yisro, lo tisa Hashem Hashem Elokecha l'shav. And this is a lav on Shvuas Shav, which has four subcategories. Number one, Nishbal Dover She'odeh She'eino Kain. He knows that this is a pole, and he says, no, it's a piece of shayish. Or, for example, let's say the shayish is made of gold, and he says it's not. Anyway, he takes a shvua on something that's a Dover Yedua She'eino Kain. Number two, Nishbal Dover She'edu Shu Kain. So everybody can see this is a stone. He takes a shvua, I swear it's a stone. Number three, Nishbal Avatel Mitzvah. He's nishba to take to not to fulfill a mitzvah that he's obligated to fulfill. And finally, the last fourth category is nishba lassos tov she'ein bo koach lassos. He takes a shvur that he won't sleep for 3 days, and that's physically impossible. So we see here in this brisa that, with the exception of lotisa Shem Hashem lashav, which is an avera chamura, and Shuv is not machaper, that's because he was over on such a lav, and the pasuk says, "Kilo Yanak Hashem Asher Yisa Shmo Lasha." But other losas, Shuva is meaningful, and it brings kapara, and that's against Rabbi Yehuda, who says that, with the exception of a lav anitak liese, Shuva cannot be machaper on any of the lav. That what the brisa here means when it says that tshuva cannot be mechaper on lotisa, it doesn't mean just lotisa. Lotisa is a representative of a category of losases, and kol the domila, anything that's on the same level as lotisa, means it generates malchus. There's no tshuva mechaperes. But if you have a lav that's below this, it doesn't generate malchus, like, for example, lav anitik liese, then tshuva is mechaper. So we come to the conclusion now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, and we even interpreted the brisa to reconcile it with Rabbi Yehuda. Generally speaking, there is no tshuva to be mechaper. Tshuva alone cannot be mechaper on a regular lotas, unless it's a second grade lower tafel lav, like a lav anitik list. But all lavim that generate malchus are similar to lotisa, and there's no tshuva mechaperes. Kilo yinake, Hashem, etc. Tashma, the Gemara now raises an objection to Rabbi Yehuda from the next part of the same brisa, and it says there that Rabbi Yehuda Omer, kol shehu me lotisa lamata, tshuva mechaperes. Lotisa lamala, tshuva olav Yoma Kippur mechaper. So it's clear, and Rabbi Yehuda in this brisa is outspoken. Now we're talking about Rabbi Yehuda the Tana, that tshuva in and of itself can only be mechaper. Just 1 second. From lotisa ulamata. Oh, lotisa, anything equal to lotisa, and certainly anything below lotisa, is tshuva's mechaperes. Clearly against the Amora Rav Yehuda, who says that tshuva is not mechaper for lotase. Here, Rav Yehuda goes on record as saying that tshuva is mechaper on lotisa ulamata, anything that's equal to lotisa, and kal milotisa, which means any losase is subject, lends itself to tshuva mechaperes. If there's something more chamor than lotisa, like a chiv kares or a chiv misa, then tshuva alone would not be a mechaperes. So the Gemara again wants to reinterpret the brisa. Tshuva lavad alone could not be mechaperes on a lotaseg gomer, as we said in the name of Rav Yehuda. And when the brisa says lo sisa, it means lo sisa v'chol d'damilo. As we said earlier, anything similar to lotisa, which is a lav gomer sheyesh bo malchus, does not lend itself to tshuva mechaperes. Toshma, what are you going to do with the following brisa? The brisa says lefisha demar b'chorev. Chorev is reference to Har Sinai, and this is the episode after the Egel, and Moshe goes up to try to achieve kapor for Klal Yisrael. And it says that tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is mechaper for someone who does tshuva. And how do we see this? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to the Morom, up to the heights, to pray on behalf of Klal Yisrael, that there should be a kapara on the Avon HaEgel, and he recites the Shlosh Midos of Rachamim, the 13 attributes of compassion, and one of them is Menake, which means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Machaper. He's Menake the Aver, purifies man and cleanses him. And the Brisa goes on to say, Yochel af lotisa imayim. I might think that even lotisa is included on the pasuk Menake, which means that with tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be machaper, tabalomar ki lo yenake. Yochel af al shar chayve lavin kein. Are we excluding tshuva with regard to other lavin? Tabalomar, the pasuk says, "Asher yisa es shmo, shmo hu dienu menake, aval menake shar lave chay lave." We see clearly from this brisa, and there's no two ways about it. The brisa is explicit, maintaining that tshuva is mechaper alone on losas. The exception is going to be lotisa because it says "Asher yisa es shmo lasha." So, in order to defend Rav Yehuda, the Amora, who denies the power of tshuva to be mechaper in and of itself, tshuva in and of itself, on a los haseh, the answer is Tanai. Rav Yehuda will admit that there is a machlokas Tanai. This Sanyo we learned in a brayso al ma tshuva mechaperes al esei ve'al los haseh shenitak liesei, and there's no mention of a lav sheish bo malchus. Apparently, this brayso reflects the shita, which is Rav Yehuda the Amorit shita, that tshuva is not mechaperes on a lav greda, on a regular lav that has malchus. V'alma tshuva tola of Yom Kippur mechaper al krisos ve'al misis pesim al los gomor, meaning a los haseh, which generates malchus. So this brayso reflects the shita of Rav Yehuda, the previous brayso that derived from the pasuk Yenake, Benake, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mechaper with tshuva on los hasehs. That reflects the other shita, which is also the shita of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, who says that from lo tisa ulamata in the original interpretation, there is tshuva mechaperes. Let me just read to you a quick overview of the various braysos that we learned. The second brayso that we quoted on the Amud, Lefisha never b'chorev, That's of the opinion that Shuva alone is mechaper for all losases, with the exception of lotisa. And the last price that we quoted, al mat Shuva mechaperes, and our Mishnah, for that matter, the way Rav Yehud explained it, maintains that Shuva alone only will suffice for losases like a lotas anitik le'esei that do not generate malchus. Otherwise, Yom Kippurim is necessary, and Shuva is not alone. Alone is not sufficient. Rabbi Yishmael is of the opinion that Shuva is not mechaper for any losas without Yom Kippur. Omar Mar, we go back to the Brisa. Which means that we're going to derive that Shuva is mechaperes. So the Gemara asks me, no, what is the source to prove that when the pasuk says v'nake, it means through tshuva? It just says v'nake, and the Gemara answers this Sanya that will understand the answer to your question from the Brisa. Rabbi Lezer Omer, it says no tzarich chesed alafim no se'avam feshem v'chatov v'nake v'lo yinake, and then it says nake. Yef shalomar nake, you can't take this pasuk of Chuko Nake, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always menake the averos. Shekvar nemar lo yinake. In the same pasuk it says lo yinake. The yef shalom shalo yinake, you can't say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will never chas v'shalom be menake af avera, any avera. Shekvar nemar nake. So how do we reconcile these two? Well, Ketzad, and we reconcile them in the following way: menake u'lashavim, the eino menake eino shavim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu guarantees us that he will mechaper avera if the person does tshuva, but he will not be menake in the case of someone who does not do tshuva. So we learn from this brisa that whenever the Torah says nake, it means al yedei tshuva. That's what we were looking for, and that's what we found in this brisa. The next part of the Gemara, the sugya, is the famous arba chiluke kapara, which Emil Shasem will continue very short. Thank you very much.